Here's a fact that might piss you off, but it's the absolute truth. We have to face the truth in order to overcome it. Most African Americans don't know true African American history. Given that the history we're taught within our schools and those we see with those black historical movies that we watch are written and or censored by the white society, we therefore do not actually know true black history. This is an absolute fact because throughout history, those empires that have been brutally oppressive never teaches true history to those they brutalized throughout history. Because logically, it would be against their own self-interest to do so. They therefore always teaches the oppressed a false version of history that benefits the oppressors. This has remained a consistent fact throughout world history and is still especially true now in regards to the history taught to African Americans by the white society. We African Americans don't know our true history. We only know a false version of history that is designed to shape our perceptions in regards to our history according to the will of the white society. Case, point, and proof. The history of the African slave trade taught to us by the white society teaches us that most of our enslaved ancestors were fairly purchased by the white enslavers. This was done to shift the culpability of the African slave trade away from the white enslavers and place the blame more greatly upon we Africans. It's deliberately designed to convey the subliminal message to we African Americans that we should blame the enslavement of our ancestors more greatly upon the Africans that sold them away instead of the white enslavers. And many of us have adopted this ideology. But let's critically think and look at the facts as they truly were. If Africans originally owned all the gold, diamonds, minerals, and natural resources, and if Western money had no value whatsoever in Africa, and the Western world had nothing that Africans needed nor wanted, how then is it possible that a majority of millions of enslaved Africans were sold off and therefore fairly purchased by the white enslavers? To believe that the white enslaved was found some miraculous way to fairly purchase the majority of those millions of enslaved Africans is absolutely ridiculous. Furthermore, such a claim is totally inconsistent with the historical behavior we witnessed demonstrated by Caucasians for more than 400 years. Their history is more consistent with them having maximized their profits by using their weaponry advantage of guns, rifles, and cannons to kidnap most of the enslaved Africans. The history we've been taught by the white society doesn't line up with reality nor facts because it's not true history. It's a false whitewashed version of history that is designed to shape our perceptions according to the will of the white society. We have to learn the true history of what has been done to us. The only way to reverse our situation is to become aware of what has been done to us. Once we've learned that true history, we can then develop the proper kind of strategies that are necessary to liberate ourselves. This is why those of us who knows our true history must teach those who do not. African proverb. I'm going to present you with a summary of the true African American history that white oppressive forces don't want you to learn. Unlike at the conclusion of World War II, when the Jewish Holocaust ended and the U.S. and the UN contributed massive financial support to rebuild the lives of the Jews, there was no moral obligation to do the same for we Africans. Although the African Holocaust lasted hundreds of years longer, resulted in millions of more deaths, and more greatly decimated the African culture, when slavery was abolished, America, Great Britain, and the many other white nations that benefited from the brutal exploitation of Africa felt no moral obligation to restore the culture of African people. They instead focused on their own self-interest. You see, The white society's exploitation of Africans has provided it with an era which has flourished most throughout history. Therefore, to allow this era to end would be directly against the interests of the white society, especially given that the white society's dependence upon Africa's natural resources is indefinite. Therefore, when slavery was abolished and the old methods of exploiting and subjugating black people became no longer socially acceptable with the changing times and had resulted in unprecedented unified black protests, white oppressive forces did not abandon their practices of subjugating and exploiting black people. They merely developed more covert methods for continuing to do so. And they've socialized the minds of black people to think in ways that allows the white society to continue its exploitation and subjugation of black people without any black resistance. The African slaves of the 21st century are those who cannot overcome their socialized minds. Socialized is when the oppressors exploits their monopoly over information that are systematically fed into the minds of the oppressed to manipulate the oppressed to think and behave in ways that serves the interests of the oppressors. White social scientists describe the nefarious practice as merely instilling a value system into the collective minds of the black population that makes us adhere to the authority and the existing infrastructure of the white dominant culture. There are 4 ways to effectively socialize an entire generation of people: by what they're taught, by what they see, by what they hear, and through repetition. Because the white society controls the education we're taught, the media images that we see, the societal narrative that we repetitively hear, these combined factors allow them to socialize the minds of black people without most of us even realizing what's being done to us. It's how the white society now secretly protects itself from massive unified black retribution, and it's how they maintain their dominance and control over us. The socializing process first began during our early education development, when our minds are young and most impressionable, through a whitewashed educational curriculum that withholds virtually all black racially affirming facts from us. This is done because it psychologically conditions black students to grow up perceiving ourselves through a false inherent inferior identity that aids the white society in maintaining its social dominance over black people. Because it makes us also more compliant with white dominance over our lives. This is the true reason why black people are learning more black racially affirming facts from each other than we do so from within our white governed schools. In fact, for most black people, our schools are the first places where we first experience the implication that there's something inherently lesser about being born black. And it's by deliberate design. Schools are tools of the government designed to shape and mold the minds of the students according to the will of the government. The socializing of our mind is then reinforced unrelentingly throughout our entire lives through constant, fraudulent, black racially demoralizing media propaganda that keeps us believing only the fraudulent worst about ourselves. This demoralizes us, divides us, creates black self-loathing, and shifts black collective aggressions away from the white society and redirects it against ourselves. It also attacks the core foundation of what bonds us as a people, and we can then be ruled over forever. This socializing process is the true hidden reason why many black people are now self-loathing, perceives ourselves as being our own worst enemies, and reveres Caucasians in spite of a brutally horrific history to the contrary. It's always by deliberate design when the oppressed start thinking exactly as the oppressors wants them to think. Whenever this happens, it's always because the oppressed have been socialized to do so. Nothing is being done in our defense because we no longer have true black leaders. We only have black puppet leaders that actually works for the benefit of the white establishment. And most black people not only don't know what's happening, they don't even know they don't know. This is our hidden reality. It is time to wake up to our reality. One love and peace.